Hello, 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 everyone. On this beautiful, beautiful day. This is Desiree coming to you from Queer.Love.Light, the sacred portal that I have created to bring more love, more light to the world by reconnecting ourselves to our higher power and activating our innate self-healing powers to become better and better beings for the betterment of the world. So today, I'm really excited to introduce you to a very, very beautiful soul that I just recently met through her work. And I'm so inspired and really honor and respect, the love and the light, the power that she is bringing to the world through the work that she does by inspiring other people like yourselves, like myself, to reclaim our spirituality. And so her name is Bex Mui, and she's biracial, Chinese, Polish, queer, lesbian, cis femme organizer and consultant committed to the work of LGBTQ plus affirmation at the intersections of education, spirituality, and sexual and mental wellness. And she is an educator, organizer, advocate, and facilitator. So she enjoys meeting people where they are and supporting communities in their LGBTQ affirmation efforts. And she is very, 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 very experienced in spiritual organizing and also social justice work. I'll let her tell us a little more about her. And also she has a new book that's coming out that I'd love her to tell us more about. That is part memoir and also a very very um, beautifully written book about how she found her way back to her own spirituality, reclaiming spirituality, and now inspiring others to do the same. And so the book itself is almost like a guide book for those of you who would like to delve deeper on this theme and journey of reclaiming our spirituality. So without further ado, let me bring you Bex. Hello, Bex. I
Hello.
am so happy to see you and have you on this very, very humble little show that I have here to bring more love and light. And, again, I have to say, when I came across your work, I'm like, yes, I have found my tribe, again in this lifetime. So yeah, so tell us more about about yourself and then in that telling the storytelling, tell us how you came to writing your book.
Sure, absolutely. And I just want to say thank you so much for creating this portal and this platform for queer love and light. I'm really glad to be connected with you and really honored to be here to get to talk about House of Our Queer and my upcoming book, but really excited for just the energy charge as well for the work and the light that you're putting out there. So thank you so much.
Thank you.
So it was a wonderful intro, has all of the parts of the things I do. What I'll also say is that this book, it's called House of Our Queer, Healing, Reframing, and Reclaiming Your Spiritual Practice. And as you mentioned, it really is both a memoir and explanation of my journey, being raised Catholic, largely by my Polish mom and that in that community, but also always having some Buddhist influences from my father, who is Chinese and kind of practices Buddhism as a way of life. And so it also chronicles this time that I call the pain place, which is when I came out into the queer community and, left the church or was really, not realized that that system that had been really the home of my belief was no longer fitting for me. And there's a real, break that happened between me and my spirituality at that time. And it took a really long time to kind of figure out, and as you mentioned, kind of reframe and then reclaim my way back to spirituality. And so my path happened to be around social justice organizing. That when I left the church, I found social justice activism, especially LGBTQ focused, to really be and model this church that I had lost. Like for me, social justice advocacy and teaching, I do, which is something I still do now, trainings about LGBTQ understanding and affirmation. That really was kind of the way, the true, and the light of my new identities. And it took me a really long time to see that mirror. It took me a long time to understand that I was, in fact, kind of reframing something that I had been raised in, and a lot longer to also begin to appreciate that. To understand that I was actually getting something, or had gotten something, from being raised in a church, from being raised in a spiritual and religious community, that those kind of rituals and marking time and having community around something that is more that we can't see and touch. Sometimes I call energy and spirit work just that little something behind. It took me a long time to realize that I did want that for myself. And I
Yeah.
feel like I'm still in the phase of trying to find, like you said, like find my people, find folks that are interested and like in that type of like energetic and spiritual community where I'm finding myself. And the book is largely a way and a method for me to try to find the folks that are trying to find me, folks that want to be in this work with me, like yourself. And I'm really excited that it is coming out. Really, folks who pre-ordered it are getting it this month, if not already, and then it'll be available in stores in January.
Right. Yes. Yes. So, what really touched me, and thank you so much for allowing me to read the advanced copy. It was really heart touching for me, and I mentioned to you as well that so much of it really resonated me in a lot of ways. First being, you're also part Malaysian, and I'm from Malaysia. I was born and raised in Kuala Lumpur, and so that was very, very heart touching for me in a very personal way. And but also, your journey of discovering, like, astrology, and also tarot cards, and also, like the witchy side of you, those um elements really remind me of my 20s and 30s, because I went through that myself, coming from a activist and also feminist background. So it was just so refreshing for me to read it from another, person who comes from, part of my heritage, because as we live in North America, a lot of times, a lot of these LGBT books, even, are not written from our culture. They're very, very white, as, we know. So I really, again, I want to applaud you and honor you for breaking that new ground. Not to say that I'm expert in any, LGBTQ literature at all. Maybe there are other work out there that I don't know of, but from what I've seen, it's rare and few and far between. So it is truly a very pioneering effort. What you're doing. So again, thank you for that. So I want to ask you, when you first came out to your, religious community, to your own family, how was that like? And I know it's going back to the pain place, but a lot of people are still in that pain place. So I think even in your book, you wrote about, how you came out of the pain place. And I think it's important for a lot of folks out there to learn how to reconcile and heal themselves from that pain place.
Yeah, thank you. I agree. And I want to just touch on really quickly. I do talk a lot about like the white centering of LGBTQ identity. Like even the term LGBTQ like isn't the term that is used in a lot of like communities of color. So it's something that in doing national advocacy, I did start to see, and I've always kind of seen this space between mainstream, if you will, or where the resources are flowing around LGBTQ supports, and the white centering of history and resources. Although there have been a lot of efforts made at least in the United States in the last couple of years to sort of center at least youth of color and kind of understand more POC experiences, but a long way has to go. And especially when we talk about religion or spirituality, it does tend to be centered around white people. And it is one of the reasons that I started talking about my own spirituality. I felt that to talk about it was like betraying in some way my queer community, especially social justice communities or activist communities. And there is some, I actually wrote a blog on the idea of spirituality as a particularly like cutie BIPOC or like queer and trans, like Black, Indigenous, and people of color, like mental health support, and really just encouraging us who are needing mental health supports, and if spirituality or religion is a part of that, like not to feel like we have to be silent around that and not to cut ourselves off from that because there is large vocal or white queers saying that's like not for us, so that has been a part of it as well. So
Thank you. And that's so important because, spirituality is, even in especially in the work that I do as a healer, spirituality is every part of your mental well-being, whether we are aware of it or not, you know, it is, it just is, and people can connect or relate to it in whatever way that fits for them, from the perspective of spirituality. So again, back to that pain place. Sorry.
yes.
Would you like to share with us?
Yes. So for me, in my journey, which I talk about in the book as well. So when I went to college, so I'm from a really small town off of Cape Cod, and I talk about how at that time where I was raised, the church really was kind of the community center. It was both our religious place, but it was also kind of just where we went for our holiday fair and to mark time in addition to Sundays. And so when I moved to New York for college, I both came out and kind of understood and started sharing around my sexual orientation, and also found this space. One pattern that I noticed was that folks in my life who were more religious, particularly more Catholic, had a harder time to kind of meet me and understand where I was coming from, or in some places were also coming from a place of concern or care for me in a way that felt like rejection. And so to kind of like name, I had this idea that what I wanted was love, acceptance, celebration, understanding. And, it really showed that a lot of folks that were in more religious spaces and were getting their spiritual feeding along with teachings that were really explicitly saying that LGBTQ people are someone to pray for, are a group of people that are different and also, neat should change. I think there was this feeling from folks that loved me of like, I want to protect this person. Like I want this person to be saved like me, for example. And so I only share that to say that I'm at this point, I'm grateful for those experiences, because I think we also have this narrative that there is homophobic people who are religious, who are like, anti-LGBTQ, or there's accepting people. And like I myself have experienced in my friends and my family a lot of nuances in between that. In the pain place, of course, it all just feels hard. For me, it all just felt like rejection and pain and anger and not what I wanted. But in the many years since then, as I reflect, I'm able to sort of tease out and understand the ways that the pain place was also like, although I didn't get the response I wanted, sometimes it really did come from care, love, and what I see now is like misinformation and a misunderstanding of queerness and of queer people.
Right, right. So, and then how did you heal from that? After the rejection, how did you heal from that?
Yeah. So part of it was I just let myself be angry. For me, the pain place lasted 5 solid years where I gave extremely strong boundaries around religion and church and spirituality. I was like, glad that's over. Never mind. I'm going to be over here doing not that. And I needed that break. I needed that space, and I allowed myself to do that. And I really surrounded myself with chosen family, with people who were very accepting, with people who were in the LGBTQ community. And I found passion and work in LGBTQ advocacy. So I was doing grassroots organizing. Eventually, I did professional national LGBTQ organizing, which is something that I still do. And social justice work really fed me. And that was a big part of my healing, that I just sort of redirected this purpose and focus that I had felt and that I had been experiencing through. I was very active in the Catholic Church before. I wasn't just someone who went to church and went home. I was like a lecturer. I was a Eucharistic minister. I was the first girl altar server. I was like, me, please. Like I've always been very driven by passion, spirit, work. And when the Catholic Church was my only venue for that, it was very involved in like my being and my identity and who I was. So for me, and again, this isn't true for all folks, but for me, I really needed to shift many things by leaving the church, more so than just where do I go on Sunday, right? So part of that passion, social justice advocacy really did help. I felt that I was able to bring more and more folks into the understanding that I could see was missing for other folks for a variety of different reasons. But I really, again, just taking that time and doing that work really helped. And after the time, when I was towards the end, when I wasn't in the jaggedness of the pain place, I entered what I call the reframing like place, where it's like I'm not praying to God. I don't do that. I don't know about God, but I am like having a ritual where every night before I go to bed, I say, thank you, universe, for looking out for me. And like I pause before meals, not to pray, but just to pause. And there are ways in which, 5 years in, I was like, oh, I'm doing a lot of things that I was doing, but I'm doing them in my own way. And understanding that and naming that was the first part of my healing. It was the first part of my understanding that there actually was space for me, and spirituality had a part of that, and that could actually have some benefits from being raised with some type of religious and spiritual ritual. And that really helped to lead about to a place where I could bring spirituality back into the focus.
Yes, and that is so. In some ways, it's ironic, but it's also very beautiful. The way that you are able to catch yourself, and then I don't know if you did, but it sounds to me that kind of laughing at yourself at the same time. It's like, what was that? Wasn't that a prayer? Right?
Exactly. By any other name.
Yeah, and then we realize that something is missing, right? If something is missing, and why are we defining ourselves within the concepts of what other people are telling us? And I think somebody said, I don't remember exactly who now, but religion is believing in somebody else, in what somebody else wants you to believe in. So spirituality is actually reclaiming what you already know that is true to you, so that you are reclaiming your own truth, not in the name of religion per se, that are being perhaps forced on you, or coming out from just tradition. Not to say it's a bad thing, but if it's not examined through our own experience and in our own lens, it could sometimes be misleading.
Yes. And I like to think of the phrases like when in balance and when out of balance, right? So I think spirituality can have when in balance and when out of balance in its practice, and religion. We are in a time, I think we can safely say, when many organized religions, especially in North America, are out of balance with understanding of leadership and who's, the spaciousness to understand, instead of just coming together as a community with a shared doctrine of things that aren't working for a lot of people, for
Yeah. And I mean, no pun intended. Um, but I like how the way you organized your own spirituality. you know, by and really reclaiming and reframing it every step of the way to make it something truly sacred and true to yourself. And not having to subscribe to any dogma or anything. I mean, you know, because ultimately, as I have shared with you before, I feel that all the spiritual teachers that have come before us, um, they're not teaching religion. They're teaching the truth. They're teaching us universal principles that are universal across all religions, really, but packaged in a different way.
Yeah.
So I love how in your book you kind of went on a step by step way to share with others how you repackaged some spiritual practices or rituals that you like, and really make them your own. And that I think is just so beautiful and is really needed for a world so diverse, especially for our LGBTQ community that have experienced so much religious trauma,
Yeah.
for the most part. So I'd love you to share a little bit about your special rituals, your practices that you do, so that our viewers can also learn from as well.
Absolutely. Yeah. Thank you for raising that. And I think was one of the things that did come out in my phase of understanding, at first when I left the church, the thing is that I was raised and very deeply involved in the church for 20 years of my life. And there is no getting out of that. There is the way I think about the world, the way I think about my life, the way I categorize who I am. It isn't something that leaving a church just changes. And there was a time in the pain place, for much of the pain place, where I was very angry about that. And I wanted to get rid of that. And that part of myself felt like I was carrying around someone else's stuff. And in the reframing time and in the healing time, towards the reclaiming time, what I realized was the benefits of that. And I think sometimes when we are very either not into spirituality or religion at all, or cutting ourselves off from that, or if we are only interested in just spirituality and think that all types of ritual and religion are evil or inherently bad because they are a structure, I think what can happen is that we don't have enough to actually make meaning of the work. And there takes a lot, I'm sure you understand, like as a spirit, as an energy worker, it's actually quite a lot of work and quite a lot of discipline to have something like the truth of oneness mean something, for that to be there for us in dark times, for us to use these practices that and universal truths, which I do think are at the core of all religions, or at the core of all spirituality, or at the core of all of the different truths. But because we live in such a constructed society, because we live under capitalism, because we have rent to pay, because we live in these, I live in cities most of my adult life, and these places where we've really cut ourselves off from the natural charges of the energy and the transits of the stars, we need additional steps to actually get to a place I've found where that truth is not just there for us in our tough times, but can be integrated into the way that we move, live, manifest, charge, let go, interact with other people, love ourselves, and love others. So that's why that I call it my spiritual toolbox. So that's why my version is more like have the practices, do the things. It's an ever evolving process. I am always changing in the things that are lighting me up, and I feel, yes, and I think a diverse community and a diverse set of practices for ourselves is really a way that I've found to kind of meet in the middle, where I am both, focus on and open to lots of different energies, but also not so open that I have no idea how to move forward, or how to actually spiritually grow. So, for me currently, the practices I have are some reclaimed Christian roots. And part of that is really understanding the difference between Jesus as like a light worker And if you look at the truths he was, and the messages that he was spreading, and the work that he was doing, even just zooming out, considering him, whether or not you believe in him as like a god or a deity or a light worker, but even as a person who was just showing solidarity work and understanding how to reach communities, and had a love that was a message of love that was really powerful and changing, the lessons we can learn from that, and the separation between that and church, or church leaders at times. That's a big part of my own personal healing as someone who was raised in the church. So, for example, I do a reclaimed version of Lent every year. And that's like a very Catholic thing. It's a Christian thing. It looks at the time in between when Jesus was, before he died and was resurrected. And I use that as a time of just kind of auditing my own indulgences, and a time for me to, abstain from things so that I can then reappreciate them come spring. And so that is, something that I do for myself that also kind of allows me to tap into something that I did for a very long time.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
It's beautiful, what you're doing with how you are framing and reclaiming it for your in your own understanding and in your own truth. And I think ultimately that's what spirituality is. It's actually our own truth, the own truth that is actually universal in every one of us. It's just there's different paths to the truth, right? Like they say, there are different paths to God, So whatever your belief system is, there is a universal truth. So, and I just find it so inspiring that you found the the tools for social justice and spiritual organizing from your church going experience, and that the all the experiences and all the um, skills that you've learned as a church community leader, and you are rechanneling that energy and those wisdom into doing work of reclaiming spirituality. I think that's beautiful, and you're actually living it, So I hope that there are more people out there who can also learn from what you've done with your experience.
Thank you. And I think that is part of the work of House of Our Queer, and part of the book. I think we have a narrative that says there's LGBTQ people over here, and there's religious and spiritual people over here, there's POC over here, and there's white people over here, and the way that we think about religion, are all in these other ways. And I, as a biracial person, like I've always sort of been in a little and a little out of groups. It's really experience that I'm navigated for a lot of times, and I think it's part of what's helped me to be a yes and kind of being in this lifetime. And for me, what I started to realize was that by saying like that spirituality and religion there, and here's me and my social justice radical queers over here, as much it became, I started to realize, at least for myself, a little of like cut off my nose despite my face. Right. It started to be like, oh yeah, like keep it. I never wanted it anyway. That's yours, take it. And, what I found, there's a lot of talk in social justice and radical communities around self-care, right? Around radical self-care and what this looked like. And I experienced such incredible burnout after doing national organizing, particularly in this country over the last couple of years. And what I realized was that I was really pushed to the point where for me, self-care was spirituality, that I needed something more recharging, more refilling, more like filling some part of me that as much as I tried, the things that I was seeing wasn't reaching me. And I finally got to a point when I realized, I think, the pandemic was a big part for me. I think the pandemic for all of humanity was, a very powerful experience of which we are not yet knowing. We in our lifetime may never know the full extent to like the shifts, but what we can certainly say is that we all like were grounded, right, by the universe and by many shelter in place laws in ways that we haven't been as a species for a long time, and likely in many of our lifetimes, certainly in mine. And so when I had that time to sit, I was really unable to ignore some of the things I had been very easily ignoring and,
Mhm.
distracting myself with, again, because of the societies that we've like created. And I'm excellent at tapping into those types of distractions. But what I did realize, in response, like, to bring up organizing, it was that there was this part that spirituality was really filling. And so saying yes and allowing in, it's also when I started really turning in astrology and tarot and energy work, which are now a big focus for my spiritual practice, allowing those not to just be to come into a center, to really engage with them in a way that was more ritualistic, which was more larger, and to share about them in ways that I had previously not really had not been doing, and had felt kind of had challenges doing, especially in the queer community.
Yeah, I know. You know what you're bringing up is so important because I come from that community as well. The social justice community. My first adopted family were really mostly people from the feminist movement in Japan. And also in the LGBTQ advocacy rights community. So like that's what one of the things I really liked about your book is that exactly what you just talked about, how important it is for us to reconnect with spirituality for really it's really radical self-care, as you put it. It's radical because we radically need it. you know
Absolutely.
yeah.
Yeah.
And the other thing I really loved about the book is you said that queerness holds space. Yes. And it moves and bends with us as we grow. you know and you're really living that yourself, and through example, um to allow yourself to continue to grow in this reclaiming of your spirituality. And then on that journey, at this stage, you are creating a space for others to also join you on that journey, which I think that is so beautiful. And so would you like to talk a little bit about what you do with the House of Our Queer?
Yeah, absolutely. And I will say it's definitely been a part of my spiritual growth. I'm an Aries, I'm a Capricorn rising. I've spent a lot of time wanting to just be right, wanting to know, wanting to be done, wanting to be like, here it is. I'm just gonna, if I study hard enough, if I work hard enough, I'll get this answer and it will be it. I will arrive, right? I will be done. And I have spent so much time in that, and life has just continually been like, no, 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 push that ledge, that ledge, that ledge, that ledge. And it is like been, part of House of Our Queer comes from, I don't think I would have been able to start this work without coming to an understanding in a place that, at least for myself, there is no end, that there is the ability of saying, this is for now, this is for me, this is for this moment, this is what it is, and being able to create a space. And something I love about space creating or organizing, especially in queer spaces, is that we can come together and find our joy and our connection in incredibly beautifully diverse spaces. And that understanding that coming from different places, having different backgrounds, having different beliefs or ways that we engage is such a part of what feeds us, and makes our spaces so vibrant and so sustainable over time. So House of Our Queer really came from, like I mentioned, when I got out of the pain place, and then I still had many years of kind of knowing, like, oh, something like this feeling, the spirituality is calling me, is holding there, is a thing I'm engaging with, and circling around it and then coming away from it, and not quite being sure what it meant or what to do with it. And so House of Our Queer really came from just an understanding that it was time to put it together, and it was time to try to really give my energy and attention to this idea of creating I call it a spiritual play space. I wanted something that is for us and by us and centers very much on queerness as a blessing, and to see if we honored that as a kind of as our essential truth, as our spiritual well-being, what community, what rituals, what joy, what healing could ripple from that. And so I think we're definitely still in the phases of figuring that out, which I delight in. I'm very grateful to Purple Palm Press for creating the book, or for, making the words that I wrote. It was very much, House of Our Queer, the book, is to me, and if it were left in my hands, a 64-page Google Doc. Not to say that the things that are in it, they come deeply from my experience, and they are offerings from my spirit and heart, and they are the story that only I can tell about only my experience in this world. But without this collaboration, there would not be a book, and there would not be a book tour next spring, and there would not be this opportunity to take this work around the country and try to find the folks that are trying to find me. So I feel both really grateful for this place, and very in gratitude for the universe and the connections there as well.
Yeah. And, I think you probably would agree that, there's something very powerful um, with coming together to be on this spiritual journey as a community. There are, obviously there are other practices, ascetic practices where you go to the cave and you just meditate on your own. That's spiritual as well. That's also a choice. And I am one of those people that I actually aspire to do that, to go to the cave and meditate on my own. I didn't go to a cave, but I did do that for a period of time on my own. But but on my journey, I actually realized I didn't come from a background like you. I didn't go to church. I didn't go belong to any I was brought up in a Buddhist tradition, but I never went to the temple to be part of a Buddhist community. So I don't come from that kind of spiritual organized religion, as you people may say. But what I have learned in my own spiritual journey is that um, we are meant to be in community so that we can grow together, and through that community, through being with each other, is how we actually discover our true authentic selves, through through the community, whatever community you choose to be part of. So 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 it is truly important for like a safe space like House of Our Queer, to then create that space so that we can, people can collectively come together. So how big would you say your community is now? And what's the next phase, and what are the exciting plans ahead?
Yeah, absolutely. Well, one thing I just want to just uplift from what you said as well, like as I talk often on House of Art Queer about just the power of beliefs. I think we do have this, especially in the States, there's like, this is science and science facts, and this is belief, and like, this is real, and this is over there, and like the floofy, whatever. And I talk about how, we have a Western calendar and a 5-day work week because of belief. There is no reason. We've all collectively decided now in this phase of humanity that January 1st means something, and that Saturday and Sunday are different. Like, that is pure belief. We enough of us believe it, and it is so. So I absolutely think that there are these ways, these secular ways in which we are seeing belief play out. Like money is absolutely like a belief system, right? And there's like ways in which all the many, many, many things that we don't consider belief, that rule our lives, that we follow, are actually belief systems, and can help us to just tap into the power of, as you mentioned, like there is exponential power when we come together. And when we come together around energy and spirit and belief, there is this magnified power. And I also, there's like a lot of activists over time who have kind of understood that. I'd say Martin Luther King, really understood that as both a minister and an activist. And so I'll just say that is, I'm excited about the opportunity for queer folks to have that same type of organization and power in our beliefs, to have queerness as a blessing, kind of ripple out and see the larger beliefs if we have this connection. So currently, right now there's, I'd say like 2,600 folks on part of the Instagram community. I do IG live offerings every Monday called Queer Church, where I just share very short, 15, 20-minute offerings for the week ahead. I look at astrology. I look at, we pull a tarot card to give some guidance for the week, kind of channeling our ancestors and the energies around us that we can stir up. And I also frame that with an offering that is some type of reading. I do think I try to bring that in from more traditional church practices, but having that be, the readings are, queer centered, or from women, or from folks that are, not in some type of religious doctrine most of the time, just to give ourselves a spiritual consideration that's related to what's going on, usually astrologically or perhaps at the time of year. And so there is, folks that engage in that way. There are folks that follow the offerings. We have a newsletter listserv. So folks that are a part of that, some folks are not into Instagram, and I fully respect that. And so there's a newsletter that folks can also join to stay connected. There's the folks that have pre-ordered and that we hope will continue to order the book that I would also consider part of the community. I also, in the Bay Area, help to co-run a dance party called Queer Magic. And that's a monthly dance party here in Oakland, where it's a chance to come together and stir up energy. And they're themed based on the astrology, the astrological sign. And I do tarot readings for the community in that space. And then upcoming will be, again, the book tour. So we're taking 3 months to drive pretty much all around the country, at least around the borders as much as we can, to really see what other folks, again, that I'm trying to find, that are trying to find me.
Mm-hmm. It's so exciting to hear this. It's like you're hopefully you'll be able to bring more folks onto this queer caravan of reclaiming our spirituality, right? And we so need it. And one of the things that inspired me to first of all start this portal and also be leading this meditation group for the Vancouver Gay and Lesbian Community Center is that we know that there's a lot of healing that's still needed, in our community. With, as I mentioned before, many of us are still trapped in that pain place, whether it's something that they choose to be not facing, or whether they're conscious of it or not. There's just a lot of people who are still in that pain place, and for me, through meditation, I'm also like yourself, trying to reach out to folks who are looking to, heal from that pain place, and co-create a safe space for each other. So, one of the things that I also really resonated with me in your book was how you again also reframed the role of Mary Magdalene in the Bible, or in Christianity. And I was like, yes, because I'm not Christian, but I shared with you and I won't go too much into it today, of my own, journey of re re I would say, connecting myself with Jesus, and then in my own learning about his life story and his work, and also I haven't read uh, the Gospel of Mary. I haven't read it. It is actually on my to read list. I
It's
just
a quick
haven't gotten
read.
around
Yeah,
it. I'm sorry.
it's a quick read. It's a short gospel.
Oh, okay. So I haven't gotten around it, but I did read about her relationship with Jesus, and how, the feminist community has reframed that. So yeah, tell us a little bit about that, about how your discovery of that, changed your perspective as well.
Absolutely. I am really big, a big part of my spiritual practice and my work is around femme divine and sacred sexuality. I do, in addition to just larger LGBTQ advocacy, advocacy around like queer sex ed and reclaiming of our bodies and understanding like consent and boundaries as queer folks. That's a big part of something I think that is really missing and being misrepresented in a lot of religious spaces, and not just for queer folks, but certainly for queer folks and also for women and people who can give birth, and femme folks across time. So a lot of the space that I see and a lot of the need for healing that I see in our community, and in our country and perhaps the world, really comes from this, just centuries long, historic long misogyny that just filters into so much of our talk about like a belief system, right? That is like really been put into practice through institutions. So Mary Magdalene is someone who's been extremely misrepresented in religious communities, and I'll say especially the Catholic Church how I was raised. And because the Bible is, what we call the Bible is actually like a canonized and selected work that has a very patriarchal lean and tint and lens. Mary Magdalene has also been really misrepresented in the Bible, and also the church kind of I outline in the book, kind of the Catholic Church at least, and through different popes is spread lies about who Mary Magdalene was and what her role was, and really diminished her and her power over time until very recently in what I would call a very like too little too late type move. So I love sharing about her. I think that Mary Magdalene not only is a light worker, a patron saint, the first disciple, someone who is powerful in that Jesus himself really saw her, and her like ability to understand and use her body and bodily intuition to have like divine, like connect to the divine or the universe or whatever it is you think of as higher powers. There's some really powerful messaging around that, and also just independently for herself. She's been someone who I really admire, whose role in history and whose messages really I think are really part of the healing that's missing in like current spiritual practices.
Mm-hmm. Yes, and that's so important. I remember when I found out about that, I was like, wow, again,
Of course.
I'm, I'm sorry.
It's like, of course.
Yeah, I when I was in my 30s, I've always been one of those people, like, we live in like the world of conspiracy, and so I've been a big fan of X-Files because of that, and so when I in my learning, when I found that, I was like, well, surprise, surprise. And it's just really shocking that the church can frame someone like that, and mix her up with somebody who's a sex worker. I'm like, how can that be?
I
you know
I
but
was
but But then again, if you think of how the world operates, as you said, in a very on a very patriarchal, in a very patriarchal system, no matter which part of the world you come from, I guess it's not surprising.
Yeah, in a very sex negative way. There's also some, I think, even the idea that um, labeling Mary Magdalene discredited her and made her, instead of being, part of this lineage of, the oldest profession, and sex workers who bring so much joy and light and healing to the world and have always done so. And instead of allowing that to be a part of it, it's like really used as this way to discredit her and shame her, which I think is really unfortunate and so sad. And I absolutely, I think, it makes sense if you were to think about wanting to create a religious practice or a group of religious folks who are disconnected from our bodies, and how powerful it is that we understand that we can stir up energy and access that like divine universe through ourselves. And I think that it makes sense business model wise over time that message is bad for business, right? There's this way that it is like, oh right, like this is what happened out of balance, right, over time. I think when I like to think about these at their roots, again, like imbalance and out of balance, like the way I practice spirituality, regardless of who and what form, I really believe in the balance and sort of this like Venn diagram of inner intuition, of checking in with myself, of understanding and better understanding where I am, what I'm feeling, what my intuition hits are, and also balancing that with institutional. I think that we can get out of balance sometimes, like you're saying with the cave, like as beautiful as that is, the folks who have privilege and access to that can be spiritually enlightening themselves and not necessarily bringing that back to community where it's most needed, or can get on some type of path where our ego sometimes gets involved with what we think is our own spiritual growth. And I think we show examples of all over in which that kind of can get out of balance without the checks and balances of institutional ritual and community leadership and co-leadership, things like that. And when we're too institutional, if it's too much like this, sit now, kneel now, stand here, this is good, this is bad, it's also
Right.
balance. So I think that for me, having some type of both, not just saying like, oh, I'm just instantly good because everyone's good and I'm good and I can be done and that's it, that's fine. It's not going to help me spiritually grow. It's not going to help my community. It's not going to help folks that need it the most. And at the same time, if I'm like, this is the church of, like, I'm not creating here's the house of our queer path for what you do. And as long as you follow what I say, then you'll be done and you can pat yourself on the back and go and go to sleep and be over. So some type of balance between that is something that I'm really like curious about and wondering how that looks for other people.
Yeah. I just want to, paraphrase this from, what I've learned, from healing in the Chinese tradition,
Mm.
because I'm Chinese, and also the modality that I'm trained in is comes from a Chinese tradition. It's all about balance in the yin and yang.
Yes.
So, right. So the world is in the state that it is because our yin and yang are totally out of balance. So healing is actually, if it really boils down to a very, very simple principle, which is balancing our yin and yang. If we have perfect yin yang balance, we would be in a much better place, in the state of the world, and also our own well-being, our community, our family, and so far and so forth. So
Yeah.
it's the same thing with everything has yin and yang. Every little thing has yin and yang, and even within the yin and yang, there's yin and yang.
Yes. Yes. I absolutely agree. And I think that is really, I follow that. I also look at the balance around the elements. So in tarot and in astrology, there's also air, earth, land, body, spirit, all of the things that are kind of can water, the fire, what can be in and out of balance. And I like look at that as well. And you can kind of see in your chart and see in the stars, like how understanding balance or what's needed to add balance can help us as we're navigating. And I think that's part of why the femme divine and sex positivity is such a large part, or feels so strong in the offerings that I'm called to around House of Art Queer right now, because we're in such out of balance. We've had patriarchy for so long, just institutionally, and we haven't been able to shift that. And I think the need for understanding like matriarchal leadership, matriarchal organizing, femme divine joy, the spaciousness and play that femme creates, regardless, again, that's not about our gender expression. It's not about our gender identity. It's this understanding of what feminine energy and femme spaciousness can provide for the society right now, because it's really been so controlled and so stifled for so long.
Right, right. Thank you so much. And one of your writings in your book that I really really love, which is why I created a meme for it, is being queer is a blessing. I love it. I love it. I think you should trademark it. It's so true, in so many ways, and on so many levels. So what I'd love to do is to close with a meditation, to honor each other. Everyone who's watching the show, and listening to this podcast, to honor each other as our who we truly are within, and truly we are a blessing for each other. Even if we don't know each other, we have never met each other, our spirits know each other very, very well, because ultimately in the spirit world, we are all one. So you would allow me to play a very soft instrumental music, which is the Lapis Harmony instrumental music, and we'll just spend 5 minutes to just honor each other for our queerness and that true authentic self that we all hold within. So let me connect. So I invite you to close your eyes and take a deep breath in. And just take a moment to connect with yourself. And focus your mind, your lower abdomen, and just connect with that deep part of yourself. And just honor that spirit within for all that we are, all the beautiful parts, and even the parts that we may not want to see. They're all part of this beautiful being that we are. This beautiful soul that inhabits each of us. See this golden light being within you. Shining the brilliance of our true selves. Let us offer our love to this true self. who encompasses everything that we are. And we also offer love to each other. And honor each other for who we are. You visualize this golden thread that is connecting our hearts. Every single person who is listening to this right now, let's connect our hearts and souls. I love my heart and soul. I love your heart and soul. Together, let's join hearts and souls together. Love, peace, and harmony. So thank you for the opportunity to meditate with you. And I want to thank Bex for this honor to be in community with you today and hear your very, very inspiring wisdom and insights and experience. In closing, what would you like to tell everybody what you hope that they will get from the book?
Well, I just want to thank you again for creating this portal. That was lovely. Really appreciate just like ending with such a blast of rays and positivity. I hope that folks who read the book or engage with House of Our Queer in whatever way feels really resonant or is calling them, feels that they can see themselves in some way in my story and can take something from, so each of the chapters had like what you can do offerings. And I hope that the folks who read the book or, are engaging again as I share that throughout can find the offerings that really feel like it's reaching their energy and their spirit and finding them where they are so that we can kind of continue to elevate and move forward as a queer community.
Great. What one idea or perhaps inspiration that came to me right now, in closing, is that I hope that, maybe you can have like little House of Our Queer chapters all over the world, forming book clubs,
I do hope that folks form book clubs. I do have workbooks for each of the chapters that kind of take the what you can do section and make them something that you can doodle about and really work through. So yeah, that's something you could definitely do in a reading group. That is one of my dreams. And I will say you can find everything also at houseofourqueer.com for folks that are kind of wondering to scope out the book or to find out about the tour or to download some of the meditation and workbook offerings. You can find all of that there.
Right, right. So, do you mind saying the whole title of your book, because I don't want to make the mistake of missing anything out, and
So
just tell folks where they can get the book in their hands.
it's House of Our Queer, OUR, House of Our Queer, Healing, Reframing, and Reclaiming Your Spiritual Practice. And you can find it at houseofourqueer.com. And starting in January, you can find it at a bookstore near you.
Yes, and you know what? I actually found it on Amazon, so
You can also get
it's
it on
also
Amazon,
available. Hmm.
on Barnes of
On
Noble.
Exactly. So I hope the Kindle version will come out one day. That would be very, very handy.
Yes, and we're working actually on an audiobook that should be coming out
Oh,
next year.
great. That'll be great. That's great. That's great. So thank you again, Bex. It was so lovely to have you. Um, and I hope to have you back again, to delve deeper into all the themes in the book that I feel, would spark, deeper discussion and learning, for a lot of people out there. So I really do hope that you will join us again. So
Absolutely. Thank you again. We'd love to.
thank you. So I am going to now close the show. And thank you so much, everybody, for joining us today. And I will see you again soon. So till then, be queer, be love, and be the light that the world needs. Take care, everybody.